Olá, tudo bem? Bem-vindo ao meu programa semanal aqui no 247, em parceria com a emissora norte-americana The Real News. Hoje eu vou mostrar duas reportagens legendadas para vocês. A primeira é bastante interessante e eu acho que tem relevância à situação aqui no Brasil, porque todo mundo sabe que o governo israelense, liderado pelo Benjamin Netanyahu, é da ultradireita. Houve muitos boatos depois de 2016 nos Estados Unidos que foram os russos que ajudou Trump a ganhar a eleição contra Hillary Clinton. No colégio eleitoral, ele perdeu o voto popular pelos 3 milhões de votos. Né? O sistema estadunidense é ridículo. Não tem democracia direito nos Estados Unidos. Depois de 3 anos da história, a grande maioria deles sem base em fatos nenhum, espalhado pela mídia hegemônica estadunidense, do que foi Vladimir Putin que ajudou Trump a vencer as eleições de 2016, novos dados lançados pelo FBI mostram que o governo israelense reuniu com Trump, ofereceu ajuda, compartilhou inteligência e todas as indicações são que depois da eleição do Trump, depois que ele venceu, ele começou a dar muitos favores para Israel. Por exemplo, mudando a embaixada para Jerusalém, do Tel Aviv para Jerusalém, quebrando o acordo nuclear com o Irã. Agora eu me pergunto, será que uma coisa parecida aconteceu em 2018 com Jair Bolsonaro? Por que Bolsonaro está desfilando com bandeira israelense agora? Será que não recebeu ajuda do governo israelense? Agora, sempre é importante diferenciar o governo de Israel do povo judeu. Eu não tenho paciência para pessoas que começam a criticar Israel e depois partir para os judeus todos, porque tem muito judeu que é contra o governo israelense. Deve ter algumas pessoas fora falando isso sobre o brasileiro agora, que todo brasileiro é ruim por causa do Bolsonaro. A gente sabe que isso não é verdade, tem muita luta contra ele. Eu tenho a mesma opinião sobre Israel. O governo israelense é ruim pra caramba. Isso é fato. A segunda reportagem que vou mostrar é sobre nova tecnologia de tirar carbono da atmosfera, que parece como um sonho, né? Mas o governo da Califórnia começa a investir, o governo Trump começa a investir nisso. É uma tática para reduzir emissões de gases estufas, para diminuir o risco das mudanças climáticas. Só que você vai ver, a reportagem é bastante crítica da tecnologia. Espero que vocês gostem desse programa. Um abraço, um bom domingo para todos e todas de vocês.
Welcome to The Real News. I'm Kim Brown. The U.S. presidential elections of 2016 had such a profound impact on the world. A few did predict some of the things that happened, but many others did not. Now, President Donald Trump's policies seem to clash so clearly with the interests of the citizens of the U.S. that there is no shortage of speculations reaching from conspiracy theories to proven facts about what interests have put him in power and for what purpose. Here at The Real News, we reported about Russiagate, the Russian involvement with the 2016 election campaign, and also about U.S. involvement in the politics of other countries. But new evidence shows that the Israeli government illegally offered and gave candidate Trump intelligence, which may have contributed to his victory. The FBI released new documents showing that an Israeli minister met with Trump advisor Roger Stone, who has since been convicted of tampering with justice, and offered him information collected by Israeli intelligence services. Now, this information was reported by Politico. Richard Silverstein, in his blog, Tikkun Olam, exposed that the Israeli minister involved is most likely Tzaki Hanegbi, Netanyahu's lapdog. So indeed, when Trump won the presidential election, one man was not surprised.
President-elect Trump, my friend, congratulations on being elected President of the United States of America. You are a great friend of Israel. Over the years, you've expressed your support consistently, and I deeply appreciate it. I look forward to working with you to advance security, prosperity, and peace. Israel is grateful for the broad support it enjoys among the American people, and I'm confident that the two of us Working closely together will bring the great alliance between our two countries to even greater heights. May God bless America. May God bless Israel. May God bless our enduring alliance.
And Richard Silverstein joins us today. He's an independent journalist who writes the blog Tikkun Olam, which explores Jewish and Muslim relations and the Israeli-Arab conflict. He joins us today from Seattle. Richard, thank you so much for being here.
I'm glad to do it. Thank you.
So this, to me, is a very fascinating topic. So let's start with what has been reported. In your opinion, tell us who is Tzaki Hanegbi and what made you think that he was the unnamed minister from the FBI report?
Well, the FBI documents have redacted the name of this contact, but Israeli media have taken sort of the breadcrumbs in the FBI document and figured out, based on what they said about this person, that it was indeed Tzaki Hanegbi, who is a longtime Likud apparatchik who's sort of risen in the ranks over years to be one of Netanyahu's closest political confidants. And at the time, he was a minister without portfolio, specializing in military and foreign affairs, which made him a perfect intermediary in this situation with Roger Stone, because during this period, which was a couple of months before the 2016 election, Hanegbi made regular visits to the United States, and many of those visits were designed to try to create this meeting with Trump through Roger Stone. And in the documents, Hanegbi is portrayed as telling Stone that it looks like Trump's candidacy is doomed, but that he needs an October surprise to pull things out, and that Israel has just the ticket for him. It doesn't really go into detail about what the particular intelligence information is, but it does mention that at one of these meetings, at least, Hanegbi with another colleague of Stone named Jerome Corsi brought an Israeli IDF lieutenant general to the meeting. So there is this element of Israeli intelligence being used and offered to Trump in order to win the election. And I'm trying to find out what exactly the intelligence information was, but you can imagine that that's not readily available at this point.
Well, Richard, let's imagine, shall we? I mean, you just gave us the facts. Now, let's venture a bit into speculation. I mean, what do you think was involved or contained in the intelligence report that the Trump administration received from the unnamed Israeli minister? And the term quid pro quo has floated around and attached itself to Donald Trump since he's been president. Let's speculate here. What do you think he got, and what do you think he was expected to give up?
Well, if we look at what the Russians have done, their style is what's called kompromat, which is usually trying to morally compromise their enemies. So it is possible that there was some kind of information that was meant to embarrass Hillary Clinton. It's possible that this was more along the lines of some substantive intelligence trove, like Israel and Netanyahu constantly try to present Iranian documents proving that Iran is a nuclear power or wants to get nuclear weapons. So it could be something along those lines. But I want to just go back a little bit also and say that in the midst of the negotiations and the meetings that we're talking about, it doesn't seem until the very last minute that Hanegbi actually succeeded in meeting Trump. But there is a point in the document where it says that the last correspondence between Stone and Hanegbi was on October 30th, 2016, a few days before the election. And there is a message in the document that says that the person whose name, again, is redacted, did meet with Trump on October 30th, or actually right before October 30th. That would mean if this was Hanegbi, that he did actually have the meeting with Trump. And if he did have this meeting, he did transfer the intelligence information. So that really makes this conspiracy with a lot of substance to it, rather than just a conspiracy in which they intended to sabotage the election, but didn't necessarily do it. Now, in terms of your mention of quid pro quos, there's so many possible quid pro quos here. As you know, as your viewers know, Trump has created this deal of the century with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It basically presents on a silver platter everything Israel has ever wanted in a peace agreement, and deprives the Palestinians of anything that they've ever wanted. So that would be one possible way in which you would repay this Israeli gift to him. And Trump also abrogated the nuclear accord with the Iranians and the European powers. So Netanyahu for years has wanted to destroy the nuclear agreement with Iran, and has this narrative that Iran is one of the great Satans of world nations, and an enemy to U.S. interests and to Israel. So those are two plum gifts that that Trump could be giving back to Netanyahu if this intelligence was transferred.
Richard, in the United States, it's illegal for candidates to accept help from a foreign country. But in Israel, the law is a little different. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have this mutually fawning relationship. Trump supported, I believe now, 3 presidential campaigns of Netanyahu since 2019. Talk to us about how these two men know each other. You know, the nature of their relationship seems not necessarily transparent, though it appears outwardly that they do like each other quite a bit, and they have a lot of overlapping things as it relates to personality and policy. But how did this relationship get forged initially?
Well, Netanyahu, over the 15 years or so that he's been prime minister, has tilted Israeli policy from being bipartisan in the U.S. context to being solely oriented towards Republicans. So he has, as you said, been fawning over all of the Republican candidates. As you recall, during the Obama administration, he did a address to Congress, and he bypassed Obama, and he attacked U.S. policy before the U.S. Congress on Iran. So that's where the orientation towards the Republican Party comes in terms of Netanyahu. You would think, though, that these two men wouldn't have much in common, because Trump, if anything, is an anti-Semite. He supports white supremacists, and he is hostile towards Jews who are liberal or democratic, and has even said that Jews who support Democrats are betraying their own interests and their country by doing so. But when it comes to Israel, Trump and Netanyahu have created this sort of relationship of convenience. And as you mentioned, they're both sort of deeply narcissistic. They're both view themselves as sort of, they're monomaniacs in terms of seeing themselves as the sole savior of their country, and wanting to preserve their power at any cost. And they both face huge ethical and legal complications from corruption in Netanyahu's case. And of course, Trump, we know, is riddled with corruption. Netanyahu doesn't have any sexual peccadillos that Trump does, but they're very, very similar in their personality. And that has created this really odd couple between them and brought them together in this way, even though Netanyahu really is divorcing himself from the American Jewish community, which is very hostile to Donald Trump, and also very hostile to Netanyahu's political views about the Palestinians.
And if you could, Richard, before we let you go, can you update us on what the status is of the Netanyahu administration? There was a lot of news coming out of Israel regarding the elections. And then there was a lot of maneuvering happening. Can you let us know what the latest is?
Yes, very complicated. But we just had our 3rd election in a year in Israel, And now there is an attempt to form a unity government between one of the opposition parties and Netanyahu's Likud party. However, because Netanyahu is under indictment on 3 different corruption charges, good government groups have petitioned the Supreme Court and asked it to exclude Netanyahu as prime minister. There never has been a prime minister who's been indicted serving as prime minister. And so this is testing out new law in Israel. Netanyahu will be tried under these charges, and if he is convicted, which may take some time, he will not be allowed to be prime minister. But the Supreme Court so far has shown a willingness to let this indicted prime minister continue in that role. And many Israelis who are liberal or centrist in their political views are really aghast at this, because it betrays this continuing deterioration of moral values in Israeli politics that has been going on for quite some time. So if at some point Netanyahu is convicted or the coalition falls apart, we will have a 4th election. Again, another unprecedented development in Israeli politics, and shows that the country's politics is quite dysregulated and quite dysfunctional, which I guess is nothing new.
Well, I'm hoping the United States doesn't follow that pattern of election dysfunctionality as we approach our election in November, though it is looking like it could head in that direction. But this is certainly a fascinating topic about the relationships and the dynamics between Netanyahu people and Donald Trump's people, and whether or not it played a part in the election of Donald Trump as the 45th president of the United States. We appreciate you joining us today. We've been speaking with Richard Silverstein. He is an independent journalist who writes the blog Tikkun Olam. It explores Jewish-Muslim relations and the Israeli-Arab conflict. Richard, as always, we appreciate your reporting today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And thank you for watching the Real News Network. Both California and the Trump administration have advanced a controversial form of geoengineering, a technological proposal to alter the natural environment in an attempt to offset climate change and reverse engineer the climate crisis. The two, often at odds with one another on climate policy, have quietly found common ground on this issue. Geoengineering is a climate solution favored by big oil. That's the case because it does not ask them to reduce emissions or their carbon footprint, but simply invest in more technology.
It's the idea that rather than addressing the root causes of climate change, which are the massive and unsustainable burning of fossil fuels, we will instead either mask the impacts of climate change by modifying the amount of sunlight that reaches the earth, or we will magically suck carbon out of the atmosphere even while we continue to burn massive amounts of fossil fuels.
At a February 3rd hearing, Mary Nichols, who is the head of California's Air Resources Board, the state's climate regulatory agency, became the first major state leader to praise one form of geoengineering called direct air capture.
There are a number of very small, at the moment, pilot projects that are looking at direct air capture of CO2. We need to be at the forefront of looking at these technologies and figuring out how we can pioneer some of them.
Weeks later, California lawmakers introduced legislation calling for the state to subsidize direct air capture. The Trump administration has followed suit. On March 30th, the Department of Energy announced $22 million in financing for research efforts aimed at commercializing the technique. Moffitt is wary of direct air capture.
Many people are familiar with the idea of carbon capture and storage, which is also a profoundly wasteful and energy inefficient way to deal with carbon emissions. Direct air capture is substantially worse because instead of pulling carbon out of an industrial waste stream, out of a pipe, you're actually trying to suck it out of the atmosphere. It is profoundly energy intensive. It's not been demonstrated at any meaningful scale.
Proponents of it see it differently. Here's George Paredes, a researcher for the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, a California-based science research center funded by the federal government, testifying at a February 3rd hearing.
The third approach involves using machines that scrub CO2 from the air in a process called direct air capture. This can be applied anywhere that we have geothermal heat or natural gas, and we can rely on this strategy to make as large a contribution to our goal as we choose.
Paredes has reason to support geoengineering. He formerly worked as a staff scientist advocate with the National Resources Defense Council, a group often seen as the establishment by the environmental movement. The groups, reliant on insider relationships with liberal political leaders, often come into conflict with more grassroots-oriented climate justice groups. The push for geoengineering in California is part of a larger national push supported by big oil. An example of that are subsidies to bolster direct air capture already doled out by Congress.
On carbon dioxide removal, including direct air capture, the federal government adopted massive subsidies for these technologies in legislation that was adopted about a year and a half ago called 45Q. And so we are already seeing the government supporting the sinking of massive money into the idea that we can suck carbon out of the atmosphere.
45Q is a tax provision subsidizing power plants and other industrial actors to vacuum in and store CO2 instead of emitting it into the atmosphere. The Future Act, a bill included as a provision within the budget bill in 2018, signed into law by President Donald Trump, extended the tax credit. According to the lobbying disclosure forms reviewed by The Real News, the Future Act received lobbying support from oil giant ExxonMobil and coal giant Peabody Energy. Companies such as ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Occidental Petroleum have also poured money into scaling up direct air capture.
It reflects the way technology is further permeating the environmental movement right now in the perpetuation of these types of futuristic solutions, as opposed to addressing the root causes of the climate crisis, which is our dependence on fossil fuels and extractive industry.
Ultimately, Muffet views the whole conversation surrounding geoengineering as a distraction.
It is sucking up valuable energy, valuable political will, and valuable resources from real solutions. There are ways for California and other states to act, but direct air capture sends us in precisely the wrong direction at precisely the wrong time.
For the Real News Network, I'm Kim Brown. This piece was produced by our climate reporter, Steve Horn.